Welcome to another lesson in Adobe Illustrator. Today we're going to kind of add on to the Align tutorial by talking about distributing tools. This is all part of the Align window. So if you need to get your Align window back out on your screen, please go to the window drop-down menu and go to Align. You can also get to these tools if I have a bunch of objects selected. You will see at the top in your control bar, if you have your control bar open, there'll be an Align button here. You'll also see the same window. And in your properties window, you will see the Align tools here. And if you want to get to the distribute tools, you click on the three little dots that are there, and that'll open up some of the extra options that go along with the Align tools. Okay, so there's a couple things we need to go over. I just want to review when you have a bunch of objects. Let's say I need all these rectangles to be lined up. I'm going to click any of these last three align tools over here since they're all the same size, and these will now stack up and line up perfectly. And you'll notice that the spacing is not quite right. So one of the things we did in the last tutorial was we used something called key objects. And you have to be a little bit careful here because when I go to distribute my objects, I'm expecting the spacing to be equal throughout. And the pictures kind of tell you how it's going to space things out. These are two objects kind of lined up side by side, and it's going to space them out by center. Or by right or by left, and it depends on if you have objects of different sizes or same size. If everything's the same size, you can click on any of these three buttons and it'll do the same thing. So this is going to not go right. So I'm going to click on this because I want to show you what happens. And they all stacked up right on top of each other. Okay, so what happened there was they all stacked up right on top of each other. The reason why that happens is because Align to might have been set to something else. So if it's set to artboard or key object, you want to make it aligned to the selection. So I'm going to undo. So Command Z, remember, is undo. And I'm going to go to align to selection. So now when I select all these and I distribute the objects, so these are align tools, these are distribute tools, I'm going to distribute them right through the center, and wow, look at that. They are all lined up perfectly spaced apart, okay? You don't have to move your objects into position. You could literally throw these anywhere on your screen, and you can distribute them however you want. One thing you have to, when you do selection, the two end objects are really going to determine the spacing if you're working along this plane. So if I click this button and let me align these as well, and you feel like these are too far apart from each other, if you just took the last object and move it in a little bit, now the overall distance from beginning to end, when I have all these selected, and I hit align again, now the space is a little bit smaller. All right, I hit distribute again, rather. So the space becomes smaller because the overall distance of the entire group now is a little bit smaller. Okay, and that's how I can make things a little bit smaller. You can also give it a spacing. So if you align this to key object, say, you can also give it a specific distance if you need to have the spacing distributed properly. Okay, so right now it's set to 0 point, but if I made this like 9, 10 point and I click this, now you have the spacing you need. So there's two different ways to use distribute. Okay, so that's one. Now, if I have all my objects are different sizes, and I select all these, and let me bring this back down to 0 here, and I distribute them, all the space between them is going to be different. Now, if I distribute these along the center, so I'm going to actually change this back to align to selection. If I distribute these center, it doesn't look like they're very well distributed, but if you actually look at the very center point of the objects, the distance from this center to this center to this center to the center next object is actually the same. So all the center points now are distributed evenly. So that could be a little bit confusing as well. So you have to watch that, especially if you're using objects that are different sizes. And in this case, the distribute spacing aspect might come in a little bit more handy, because now instead of this, like aligning these by center of the object, it's controlling the spacing. Distribute spacing controls the spacing between the objects. Okay, so those are basically your distribute tools, and they really go hand in hand with align. And very often, if you have a bunch of objects, actually, I'm going to undo till I get my rectangles back, because I'm going to use those for this next part, and we'll get rid of this stuff down here. Okay. Okay, so if you have a bunch of stuff selected and it's all distributed properly, let's say we want to make like a stack of windows like on a building or something like that, so like a skyscraper. If you have these objects and I copy and paste all of these and I go to the next row and I want to align my rows, what happens is this, like I want now this edge to be lined up perfectly. If you don't group your objects, and I go to align these, so I'm going to align these along the side, that's what it's telling me it's going to do, and I click this, and whoa, what happened to everything? Well, what happened was every window got stacked up along this edge here. So that's a little bit of a problem. So before you go and make different rows of windows, I'm going to take this one row and I'm going to group the object. So you can either hit Command G on the keyboard, or you can right click and go to group. Now if I copy and paste this, I can start making a bunch of rows, and I'll make these a little bit all over the place on purpose here. Now when I select these objects and I go to align and distribute, now I have my rows of windows all spaced out nicely. Okay, so that's why grouping is important, because now this whole row is one object and it's being aligned with this row, which is being aligned with this row. Okay, so it's aligning the groups rather than the singular objects. So that's when grouping becomes very important. Okay, so there's align and distribute. It's something you're going to use very often in Adobe Illustrator.